you have feelings over facts, anger over analysis. As a scientist, I mean, how do you make sense of what's going on right now in our
It's
society?
frustrating. All I can say is the universe is in good shape. It's Earth that has all the problems, right? So it's.
I need a hobby. Hello, all you internets out there. That's you. You're an internet. Welcome to my mom's basement with one gross overhead light casting ugly shadows on me and an old mirror doing the best it can to help. But in a broader sense, welcome to Nicheless, a brand new YouTube channel starring yours truly in his ceaseless endeavors to find some fulfilling form of artistic expression in the wildness of the nothing. For our first series of videos that take place in October, and as you can tell with the decorations, are spooky, I'm going to be venturing into a genre of YouTube video called How I Would Have Fixed, which is a name that, for the record, I don't like because it implies inherent brokenness. But hey, when I create a genre, I'll get to name that. The big names in the genre right now are Nando V Movies. Bob Chipman used to do it on his channel Movie Bob with the show In Bob We Trust. And I know What Culture used to do it on their channel. This genre needs more women. And people of color. Luckily, here come the gays to fill in that front. So, it's Halloween, and I'm a big fan of the Universal Monsters. And ever since Marvel found such success with the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the Universal Monsters have been attempting a reboot to make Universal their own cinematic universe. And people keep not responding to it. Their latest attempt was The Invisible Man, which they made with Blumhouse Productions, and fun fact, that was the last movie I saw in theaters, because the world is ending, actively, as we speak. But I thought, hey, I do words good. Don't use this video as an example, just trust me. So why don't I take a stab at it? And before we get started, there's a few ground rules we have to go over first. First and most importantly, I'm pitching an entire cinematic universe. First movie to last movie. So that means that it's too long to fit into one video. So at the moment, the plan is to chop it up into 3 videos, release them week by week, and then the last one would come out on Halloween. And I think if we're aping for Marvel's success, then why not imitate their structure? Marvel movies have phases that lead up into one bad guy where all the superheroes team up to go get him. So we're gonna have themes. We're gonna have 3 themes, each based off of one of the most prominent themes in the old Universal Monster movies. And they're gonna lead up to a sequel to one of the movies that has the most evil monster from this theme in it. And not every character from all the other movies, not even every monster, is gonna come together to fight that monster. But some of the more memorable characters will find themselves in the path of that big bad super evil monster. And hopefully, if I do my job right, that film, that sequel film, will be a culmination of all the themes we've brought up until that point. Which reminds me, if you want to see those other videos, I suggest that you like this video, because it makes me feel good about myself, but also subscribe to this channel. And I'm told there's also a bell-shaped button that you're supposed to push that will notify you when I release future videos, which I assumed was what the subscribe button did. But I guess it's not. Now, the other bit of groundwork we have to cover is what actually is a Universal Monster movie. You see, despite the advertising, the Universal Monster movies were not the Marvel movies of their day. Nobody was behind the scenes planning out the interconnectivity. And as such, there's some questioning as to what movies count and what movies don't. Now, there is a realm of safety in these answers. For one, Universal sells a 30-film box set that includes these 8 franchises. Although, for our purposes, we're gonna take out Abbott and Costello. I'm not gonna say this is a grim, dark universe devoid of joy or anything, but a straight comedy might seem a little at odds with the rest of the universe. Not to say that you can't make an Abbott and Costello equivalent. If you wanted to make Key and Peele meet the Wolfman... Oh, shoot. Actually, I really love that, actually. But if you wanted to make it, then you could. And you could just release it at any time, and everybody'd have a great time at the movies. But I'm not going to pitch an Abbott and Costello equivalent. Now, these two people commonly associate with the Universal monsters, although I can't seem to find anywhere where Universal claims to include them. But most people do. So they're going on the list because they're fun and I like them. But then that brings us to this giant ass list. Oh boy. Some of these are Universal horror movies that borrow the same various elements that so-called official films borrow, i.e. character names, locations, etc. Yet they're never included in any of the promotional material. Some of them only feel like they should be included in the same way Hunchback and Jekyll do, but Universal might have never even made a movie based off of them. Some of them are names of movies, some are books, and some are just names of monsters that I know are in there somewhere, but I can't figure out what movie they come from. And some others still are wrong on purpose. So you'll fight about it in the comments. I learned it from Gail Simone's Twitter feed. Now, we'll use maybe 1 or 2 of the ideas taken from this list here or there as Easter eggs or added flavoring, but nothing too important. And I'm not gonna tell you which ones they are, because I want it to be a surprise. So now, we can finally begin. And we'll begin with the first film in our first theme. That theme? Death. The film? The Black Lagoon! I'm going for an Elvira thing. Am I getting it? Maybe like Spock? Maybe like Leonard Nimoy? I'm getting it. I'm good. Now, our cast. William Jackson Harper is our lead as Dr. Jack Griffin. He's lead scientist at Bella Price Technologies. His cousin, Harriet Griffin, a professor of ancient religions, is played by Angela Bassett. An environmental scientist also working for Bella Price, Kay Lawrence, is played by America Ferrera. CEO of Bella Price Technologies, Sam Neill, as Dr. Ernest Richardson. His daughter and only heir, Carol Richardson, is played by Michelle Williams. She is also in a long-lasting relationship with Jack Griffin. There's also the jingoistic Bella Price Research Center head of security, Mark Williams, played by Gerard Butler, the biggest star in this movie for some reason. And of course, the Gillman himself, the creature from the Black Lagoon, Ilya Shuman, as he is referred to here, is played, of course, by Doug Jones, king of the fish people. There are 2 prologue scenes before we really begin. One is of Dr. Richardson in a commercial for Bella Price's environmental safety initiatives. The other features 2 firefighters in the Amazon being hunted by the creature as they attempt to put out an out-of-control planned fire. As the ash turns the sky's blood red, it almost resembles a new world. The creature kills the more laissez-faire firefighter, but leaves the more environmentally conscious one alive. That is, until he's crushed by a falling, burning tree. There was a time for subtlety, and it died with the purge. The story doesn't really kick into place, though, until we meet Jack Griffin. He was working in his lab late one night when his eyes beheld an eerie sight. A break-in. They ransacked the lab and tied Jack up, stealing a copy of his research. Research that he says is for his popular space travel, yet the intruders don't believe him. Before they can say what it looks like to them, though, they get chased off, and some very badly hurt, by Mark Williams, the Gerard Butler security guard. Jack doesn't have a lot of time to think on these implications, though, as the 2 main problems in his life occupy most of his time. For one, he feels like Carol is going to propose to him soon, and he has this nebulous feeling that for some reason his feelings for her have started fading, but he can't place why. Meanwhile, he's also been contacted by an old cousin of his who's trying to reconnect after a traumatic death in the family left them at odds decades ago. Dr. Jack has no interest in this relationship either, yet he doesn't want to alienate his family or his current and future bosses. It's a real quandary, and now you know why we cast Chidi Anagonye. But luckily, the perfect distraction is placed in his lap when an employee, Kay Lawrence, approaches with some concerns. She thinks that they might be cutting corners at one of their dumping sites in the swamps, since the surrounding plant life seems to be mutating. Since the police are asking for some time to look over the lab, Dr. Jack and Kay decide to head off and do some field work at the dump site. When they get there, there's guys in hazmat suits hanging around, and the chemicals they're dealing with are no joke. Meanwhile, the plant life is even more lush than Kay remembers, and the hazmat guys don't understand it either. And according to them, the animals are getting pretty weird too. For one, they're hanging around, which is not necessarily normal for a chemical dump site. In addition, they're also getting more aggressive, to the point where they're going to send armed guards and hunters whenever there's anybody working at the dump site. Finally, one of the hazmat men says that one of the alligators looked right at him, and it had human eyes. Uh-oh. But luckily, Dr. Jack is having dinner with Dr. and Lady Dr. Richardson that night, and he can tell them they need to shut this site down yesterday, which he tries to do, but he never gets the chance. You see, he was right about Carol, and she does propose at dinner, in a very public place, practically forcing Jack to accept, and Dr. Richardson offers Jack a promotion after the wedding. That same night in the lab, though, the cops are poking around, and one of them touches something he shouldn't, and gets dead disintegrated. Meanwhile, at the dump site, the plant life has gotten more lush and tropical, even in this short amount of time. We also see the same guys who broke into the lab breaking in here, and holding some sort of spiritual ritual, and as they continue their ritual, the swamp water starts to bubble and boil. But they're violently interrupted by a troop of Bella Price security agents, led by Williams, who start beating and maybe even accidentally killing the intruders, until suddenly, something starts killing them. Williams can only survive by running away, but looking back in the night, he catches a glimpse of a scaly creature descending back into the water. Act 1, over. Next day, Jack shows up to work, and the lab is entirely shut down due to that disintegrated, missing cop. But the dump site is still up and running, and more luscious than ever. It seems to have more water than usual, though it's taking a darker hue. Jack and Kay overhear Williams telling Dr. Richardson that the looters attacked again last night, but it seems like they know more that they're letting on, since Williams refers to them by name as the Lamayans. Jack and Kay should probably tread a bit more carefully if they're being lied to. Jack knows somebody who could help them learn about the Lamayans, but he refuses to call them. Instead, he insists that the answer is in his notes that he can't access. Kay is taking this way more seriously and decides to break into the Bella Price Research Center and retrieve Jack's notes. She does this, but not before having her own run-in with a creature, who seems to be taking on a sort of ghostly, not really there quality. While the notes only prove that Jack might not entirely know what he's working on, Kay draws the line in the sand and insists that he calls this person that can help. It's his cousin, Professor Harriet Griffin. She teaches them that the Lamayans are a religion dating back to the beginnings of recorded history, if not further. They believe in a pantheon of half-human, half-animal gods, as well as holding the belief that certain ordained people can become animals, although there's some debate as to whether the right translation is actually cursed individuals. Ever since the days of ancient Egypt, though, they've become more morally gray and taken up the name the Cult of the Cobra. The Lamayans have an intense spiritual connection to the natural world, and they're likely targeting the Bella Price Company for their crimes against the environment. If there is a monster, it's probably one of their gods, and if it looks like a fish person, it was probably a big one, named Hilajiman, the god Gillman. He is said to dwell in a small personal heaven, or, depending on who you ask, hell, of tropical climate, ebony waters, and blood-red skies. They call it the Black Lagoon. The three of them go down to the dump site to see how the situation has progressed, and if they can do anything about it. And that's a staunch yes and no, respectively. Not only has the plant life gotten way out of hand, and in some cases seems to be Paleozoic, but the security situation is now 24/7, with Williams himself standing guard, and he is not letting them in. That is, until Jack all but threatens to have him fired, which doesn't go over well with Mr. Shoot Your Problems in the face. As they wander through, Harriet all but confirms that this is slowly becoming the Black Lagoon. But its ghostly appearance indicates that the Black Lagoon is also materializing somewhere else on Earth, and not just here. One of them also steps in a puddle of something slimy. It's the gossamer corpse of the missing police officer. Dr. Jack now knows that whatever he's working on, it has something to do with the Black Lagoon. I'm actually running a little long on this segment, so I'm gonna cut to the chase because we have other movies to get to. Dr. Richardson knows about all of it, and furthermore, he's super down for it. You see, man could never take to the stars. The time is too late, and even if they could, it'd be for naught. The best they could hope for, if they did, was to be a parasitic force, depleting everything in the universe the way they did Earth, all for a cheap buck. So that thing Jack's been building? It's a portal to the Black Lagoon, an entire dimension that they can restart on, and it's available exclusively to the ultra-wealthy. The irony of the situation is lost on the Fortune 500 CEO. The only thing he has left to do is kill that pesky monster in there. Something they can do with enough silver and platinum. Though, given his place as a god of nature, that might be pretty bad for the Earth. They absolutely obliterate the section of the Black Lagoon in Florida, but not before the creature kills Dr. Richardson and wounds Mark Williams. The Black Lagoon disappears, and Carol becomes the new CEO. But nothing much changes. It seems Carol knew all along. She also agrees with her father's logic and sends Williams and his men off to finish the job. So our heroes must go off to stop them in the burning Amazon. Of course, Carol does assure Jack that he'd have a place in the new world as her husband. Act 3! Off to the Amazon with the crimson skies. It's a race to kill/protect the creature. Kay ends up getting killed by Williams as she allows a wounded creature to escape. The creature, in turn, kills Williams, and leaves the rest to seemingly die as they're trapped in a small clearing soon to be their pyre. An accident has left Carol trapped and Harriet paralyzed, with Jack only being able to save one. He saves Harriet, and Carol perishes in the flames. Harriet and Jack escape to live the rest of their lives, but as they gaze upon the world ablaze, they're left to wonder how long those lives will really be. Ta-da! I like it. As the start of a franchise, as a start of a universe, I like it. Although there is one more thing I have to mention. If we are going full Marvel here, then there's one more thing I need to do. And that's the end credit scene. Weary and tired, Jack brings a now wheelchair-bound Harriet into her home when they find that someone is waiting for them. They think at first it might be a cultist, but he assures them that he is not. "It would seem you two do not scare easily," he tells them, "but perhaps that will change, as many things do underneath the full moonlight." Cut to black! Yeah, it's kind of exactly the Nick Fury scene from Iron Man. But who doesn't like the Wolfman? By the way, you're gonna have to wait forever for the payoff to that one. But I'm not gonna waste too much time here, because like I said, I'm running a bit late on the time I wanted to hit for this video, and hopefully I can make it up on my next movie. And that next movie, by the way, The Frankenstein Monster. Yeah, it's a clunky name, but I'm sticking by it. And by the way, just a little heads up, this borrows a lot more from the book than it does from the movie. Alright, so let's get into the cast. I think that Daniel Radcliffe would make a perfect Victor Frankenstein, with Dove Cameron as Elizabeth Lavenza, who is not, under any circumstances or interpretation, his sister. Instead, Elizabeth is the sister of Clerval Lavenza, who was Henry Clerval in the book. He's Victor's sunshine, lollipops, happiness best friend, played by Freddie Highmore. There's also Victor's brother, Gerhard Frankenstein, played by Elijah Wood. And his father, Alphonse Frankenstein, played by Patrick Dempsey. Fight me about it. We also have Igor Fritz, played by Eller Coltrane. The esteemed but wayward Captain Robert Walton, played by one of our greatest living actors, John C. Reilly. There's also a cameo by Gary Oldman as Felix DeLacy, and his daughter Agatha is played by Carrie Ann Moss. Finally, there's the monster himself. Now, like I said, this version is a lot more akin to the book than the Universal movies. Which means that this version of the monster is one hot mamma jamma, to put it lightly. With the only really terrifying thing about him being his piercing yellow eyes. But I don't want him to be unrecognizable. So I'm also going to give him a few scars. And I think it'd be nice to have like a burn mark on that vein that goes to your heart. And it comes in from the bolts that'll still be on his neck. You get it. And in future movies when he appears, his skin will start decaying more. Because he'll be older and it'll start to look more green. And so he'll start to look like the Frankenstein we know. But for this movie, he's going to be good looking. Now, we just need an actor who is an absolutely gorgeous but imposing muscle house whose screen presence commands not necessarily respect, but certainly reverence, with a not insignificant sized forehead and a prominent neck area, who preferably it'd be somebody who's known for playing characters who have these feelings of superiority that alienate them from the rest of humanity and cause deep-seated loneliness in them. I'd also like it to be somebody who's recognizable, who might turn a few heads if we cast him. Oh, hi Henry Cavill, do you have any ideas? We open on the sound of crunching. It could be a fall leaf under your foot, bones breaking inside you, or, as it is revealed to be, ice cracking as a ship passes by. A large freighter moving through the Arctic Circle, to be exact. And at the head of this freighter, Captain Robert Walton. Captain Walton is writing in his journal about the perilous journey, and how scared his men are when one of them interrupts him. They found a man alone on the ice. He was in a dog sled, and it looks like his dogs turned against him. That must have been days ago, though, as the man is on death's door from his wounds and from the cold. They take him on board for medical attention, and once he can talk, Captain Walton sits by his side for answers. The man tells him he's looking for something dangerous, and, once he can no longer avoid it, he admits that his own name is Victor Frankenstein. At the captain's behest, Victor begins to tell his tale. Victor describes a life of loneliness, his only comfort learning, his only friend a similarly lonely child named Clerval. He tells of how he fell in love with Clerval's sister, Elizabeth. He tells of how his mother's death at age 17 not only isolated him further, but also sparked a deep curiosity in the macabre. Finally, he describes going off to university, an entire world dedicated to higher learning as his life had been. And he found it so disappointing. Anything they could teach him, he already knew. And as such, he needed different stimulation. He turned his mind back to an old interest. Months passed and nobody heard from him. Word had gotten out that he even left college and had taken up residency in an abandoned windmill. Out of fear for his well-being, Elizabeth and Clerval headed up to see him. When they did, they were greeted by a genuinely off-putting man named Igor Fritz. Igor tries to send them away, but Frankenstein sees them before he can and ushers the two in. He's overjoyed to see them, to show them his work. At the top of the windmill is a laboratory filled with strange, cobbled-together equipment and reeking of a foul stench. The more they see, the more they fear. But Frankenstein still has one thing to show them, his greatest project yet. As they approach the covered jar, they can already hear it. Boom, 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 boom. Victor reaches for the covering. He tells them the body's been dead for 3 months. The organs donated to science. Boom, 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 boom. Victor grabs the sheet and pulls it off. Boom, 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 boom. It's alive! It's alive! A severed human heart kept beating for months on end through the miracle of technology and science, and, as Victor describes it, only the beginning. The Levenzes have no choice. Victor is beyond reproach. Their only course of action? To flee. As they run off, they pass Igor in the hallway, laughing, jovial in the face of death. As Victor tells Captain Walton, he was shocked at their fear in the face of progress. But there was work to be done. A powerful storm was rolling in. That night, Frankenstein and his assistant took to the cemeteries and the graveyards of the countryside. They desecrated and plundered hallowed grounds, and though Frankenstein says he would have preferred to get their materials some other way, he knew they were running out of time. Soon comes the night, and Victor Frankenstein raises his gestalt to meet the fire in the sky. As the lightning bolts dance around his creation, striking everywhere but where it's needed, into the lab walks Clerval. He came to apologize, but has entered upon another unholy Promethean act. The whir of machinery pulls Victor away from his friend, and the slab is lowered. He begins to uncover the creature, though we, the audience, do not see. We only see what Victor describes, and what Victor describes is the evil. The evil in its soul. The evil in its horrible yellow eyes. The monster is prodded into the basement by Igor. Clerval is drawn to follow by morbid curiosity. Once in the basement, Igor locks the creature in chains and beats it into submission. The monster's yellow eyes fall on Clerval, waiting in the doorway, watching, weak of stomach and of will. As the days and weeks go past, Victor tries to forget his creation, but every night as he tries to sleep, he can hear it howling below him. The stress begins to turn his hair white in streaks, and Clerval attempts to comfort him. One night, Clerval left to retrieve Elizabeth in the hopes that she might help. But with Igor in the basement keeping the monster at bay, Victor was all alone. And yet, even in his nightmares, he couldn't escape the gaze of yellow eyes. He couldn't escape them as he awoke either, for he saw them staring down at him in his bed, and on the creature in the darkness. He saw blood. He screamed at the creature, "Back! Back!" as he had heard Igor had done before, and the creature responded in kind. That night, Victor Frankenstein abandoned the windmill, leaving behind his possessions and retreating back to the safety of London and the House of Frankenstein. There, Victor found comfort in his brother and his father for the first time. Soon he would come to accept that there he was far away from the terror of the monster. There he could return to the study of light sciences, to the safety of comfort, and to the love of Elizabeth. He would even ask Elizabeth to marry him, although the wedding night would never come. Victor wishes to continue his story, but he succumbs to his wounds once again. As the sickness overtakes him, Captain Walton leaves Victor to find rest or to find solace. The captain himself, though, finds none. Late at night he wanders the ship, haunted by the tale he's heard, and suddenly fearful for the lives of his men. His blue eyes pervade the icy abyss until suddenly they are drawn to a figure illuminated in the pale moonlight. He wears a long black coat of fur and leather, and he has long raven locks cascading down his shoulders. Captain Walton lays a hand on his knife as he calls to the man. The man responds that he's here to see the dying Victor Frankenstein. As he turns, the wind blows his raven hair off of his forehead, revealing a deep scar, and the man opens a pair of haunting yellow eyes. For this man is Frankenstein's son. As the monster goes to see him, Frankenstein is asleep once again. Captain Walton doesn't want to ask, but curiosity gets the best of him. Just as my prose has gotten the best of me again. I'm still over my time limit. So I'm gonna try to be quick again. From here on out, the story is told by the monster, who begins his tale when he's brought to life. Minutes after he was born, the monster was chained in a basement and beaten. He'd cry out in pain, but when his cries were met at all, they were met with the sounds of Victor's snores above him. After weeks of pulling on his chains, they came loose, and he was able to attack Igor, killing him. He went up to see Victor, too, but before he could decide what to do, Victor barked at him the way Igor did, and he responded out of instinct. He spent days alone in the windmill before venturing out for food and eventually found an abandoned home that he trifled through. But when he heard people returning home, he hid. Soon he'd come to learn that the old man, Felix de Lacy, was blind, and as such was not frightened by him. His daughter, Agatha, however, had the power of sight. He got by for months by coming out only when the old man was alone. He would have books read to him, and eventually he'd start reading himself, which is how he became so well spoken. But it wouldn't last. Agatha came home one night, and the monster failed to hide in time. In the ensuing panic, the monster accidentally set fire to the house, killing de Lacy. In response, Agatha formed a mob to hunt down the monster. He fled them and ended up in London. There, late at night, he happened to come across a man celebrating his sister's engagement with a friend. The monster recognized the man as the one who'd watched him get beaten that first night. His name was Clerval. In a fit of rage, the monster attacked Clerval and beat him almost to death, demanding to know where Frankenstein was. Clerval refused to give him up, but his friend was more than willing to do so. You see, this was Victor Frankenstein's brother. Gerhardt shows the monster to Frankenstein Manor, leaving Clerval in the street to crawl away. Yet the monster's rage doesn't quell, and he kills Gerhardt, leaving him to be discovered in the morning. As Victor tends to his brother's funeral, Elizabeth takes to the streets looking for her brother. She finds him on death's door and takes him to Victor. Victor is in mourning and doesn't pay much attention to them until Clerval can finally force out the words that the monster is coming for him. Clerval submits to his wounds, and they have a joint funeral. The night after the funeral, Victor Frankenstein retires to his chambers and finds the monster waiting for him. The monster believes that he is the way he is because he's missing a soul, and Frankenstein is tasked with giving him one, lest something terrible happen on his wedding night. As his wedding night approaches, Frankenstein frantically searches for an answer so he can fend off his approaching murder. Before too long, he learns of the mob still searching for the monster and hatches a plan. Soon, his wedding day comes. The monster attacks! Victor tries to get the monster to attack him, but instead it goes after Elizabeth, because of course it does. The mob springs into action, but Victor is too busy still trying to get his plan to work. Eventually the mob is able to drive the monster off. But not before Elizabeth dies too. Finally, a lesson has gotten through to Victor, and he decides it is his duty to track down this monster and kill it before it can kill anybody else. The chase leads us here. Now, to the framing device. And having heard this story, Captain Walton decides it's too dangerous for his men to continue on. As Victor Frankenstein passes away, the monster delivers his eulogy, and the words he says remind us all a bit too much of the man that created him. Before the monster leaves, he makes one final decision: to take up his father's name. The monster, Frankenstein. Oh boy. Long movie. Longer than I anticipated. Probably 2.5 hours. But hey, All the Frankenstein movies have some sort of air of pretension about them. Somehow. Now there's only one more thing to discuss. The end credit scene. As the monster leaves the ship, Captain Walton asks it what it will do now. The monster says he's not sure he can age, and as such, he has a long, lonely existence in front of him. But he's already begun thinking of ways to alleviate that loneliness.
Perhaps,
Says the monster.
I'll even take a bride.
How do you like them apples? Hopefully a lot, because this was deceptively difficult. But fulfilling, though. I'm gonna make more videos, and if in this series specifically, and if you wanna make sure you don't miss them, then be sure to subscribe and ring the bell icon. And if you liked this video, like this video. Because I went so long, I'm gonna have to chop this into 2. There were supposed to be 5 movies with the theme of death, and now I'm doing 2 in this video and 3 in a video that will come out later this week because I ran so long. And I promise I'll be shorter that time. But I don't mind it so much. It's nice to have something that makes you happy. I hope you don't mind either. Happy Halloween. I'll see you later this week.